Welcome to Africa Daily Scoop, your home for the biggest stories, the boldest breakthroughs, and the unstoppable rise of Africa. If you love powerful updates from across the continent, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned. In recent years, Africa has taken a series of bold economic steps that have dramatically shifted global attention toward the continent. International observers across the United States, Europe, and Asia have been forced to reassess long-standing assumptions about Africa's economic role. The continent's growing investment in infrastructure, manufacturing, energy independence, and regional cooperation has created an environment where African nations are less dependent on Europe than at any point in recent history. African governments have increasingly prioritized domestic value addition over raw export dependency. Countries like Namibia, Zambia, and the Democratic Republic of Congo have moved to restrict the export of unprocessed minerals, a decision rooted in expanding their own industries rather than relying on European processing. This shift has accelerated due to growing demand for battery minerals, renewable energy components, and advanced manufacturing inputs. As African leaders emphasize local beneficiation, European industries that once depended on low-cost African raw materials face significant supply pressure. Meanwhile, African regional trade frameworks have strengthened significantly. The African Continental Free Trade Area has opened the door to unprecedented intra-African commerce, reducing reliance on European markets. Businesses within Africa are trading more with one another, supported by new payment systems, logistics corridors, and local manufacturing policies. These developments reduce the leverage once held by European institutions and create a more self-directed African economic future. Foreign direct investment sources have diversified as well. China, the United States, the Gulf states, and India have expanded their economic engagement on the continent. African nations are no longer tied to a single external partner, but instead evaluate opportunities based on strategic alignment and national interest. Europe, once Africa's default trading partner, must now compete with global powers that offer new financing models, technology transfers, and partnerships that prioritize African industrial growth. Energy independence has also played a critical role in Africa's reduced dependency on Europe. Countries like Kenya, Morocco, Ethiopia, and South Africa have invested heavily in renewable energy systems, lowering the need for imported European fuel and equipment. Major hydroelectric, solar, and wind projects allow African economies to power industrialization internally. Europe's former role as a dominant energy partner has gradually faded as African nations generate, store, and distribute their own electricity through modernized grids and domestic engineering capabilities. African digital transformation further accelerates this shift. Mobile payments, fintech ecosystems, and local startup innovations have placed Africa on the global technology map. European financial structures that once served as gateways for African trade or remittances are increasingly bypassed through African-designed platforms. This independent digital infrastructure strengthens sovereignty and reduces European influence over African economic flows. Agriculture has become another area of transformation. African nations are expanding commercial farming, irrigation systems, and food processing capacity. Countries like Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, and Rwanda have implemented agriculture reforms designed to reduce imported food dependence, much of which historically came from Europe. As Africa improves food production and processing, Europe loses a key position in the African food supply chain. The evolution of Africa's transportation networks also impacts the global balance. Modern ports in Kenya, Tanzania, Côte d'Ivoire, and Senegal, along with expanded railways in East and Southern Africa, connect African economies directly with global markets, decreasing dependency on European transport hubs. Direct shipping routes, new logistics agreements, and emerging African air cargo networks give African exporters more autonomy. Global investors have increasingly recognized these changes. Capital flows into African manufacturing, renewable energy, startups, agribusiness, and mining technology have accelerated. Europe, facing internal economic pressures and regulatory challenges, struggles to match the speed and scale of new competitors engaging with Africa. African countries now negotiate from a stronger position, demanding higher value, better terms, and long-term development commitments. African governments are also reclaiming control over strategic resources. Several nations have revised mining laws, increased royalty rates, and implemented policies that require foreign companies, European firms included, to partner with local industries or invest in value-added processing plants. These reforms challenge long-standing European companies that benefited from older, less regulated agreements. The shift has been welcomed across Africa as part of a broader movement toward economic sovereignty. Political attitudes across Africa reflect similar changes. Leaders increasingly emphasize national strength, continental unity, and economic independence. European policy influence has diminished, replaced by multi-partner diplomacy and South-South cooperation. This change does not signify hostility toward Europe but rather the emergence of an Africa-first strategy that aligns with the continent's development priorities. European businesses and policymakers have expressed concern over these trends, pointing to the rapid loss of market share, influence, and resource access. What was once a largely unquestioned economic relationship has transformed into a competitive global arena where Africa holds increasing leverage. European industries dependent on African minerals, agriculture, and energy inputs face growing challenges. African nations, prioritizing domestic growth, continue renegotiating old contracts and seeking new partnerships that benefit local economies. The shift has caused intense debate within Europe. Industry groups warn of disruptions in manufacturing supply chains. Economists highlight vulnerabilities caused by over-reliance on African minerals for renewable technologies. Politicians call for new strategies to re-engage Africa as a partner rather than a resource provider. The European Union has begun proposing updated agreements focused on mutual benefit and sustainable partnerships, signaling recognition of Africa's growing bargaining power. African citizens and businesses, meanwhile, are increasingly vocal in supporting policies that prioritize local development over foreign extraction. Young entrepreneurs contribute to a rapidly expanding private sector. Governments invest in modern infrastructure that supports long-term economic resilience. Technological adoption accelerates entrepreneurship and reduces dependencies on foreign digital systems. Africa's transformation is widely acknowledged as one of the most significant global economic developments of the 21st century. No longer positioned as a passive participant in world trade, Africa asserts itself as a rising hub of innovation, resources, and investment opportunities. The world is adapting to a new reality in which Africa's economic decisions carry global consequences. Europe, once the continent's dominant partner, now finds itself competing for relevance in a rapidly changing geopolitical landscape. The rebalancing of global economic power highlights a future in which Africa takes greater control of its own resources, industries, and financial pathways. As African nations continue strengthening their economies, Europe faces the challenge of redefining its approach. Cooperation, competition, and adaptation will shape the next phase of Africa's relationship with the global economy. What is clear is that Africa's economic rise is no longer a distant projection but a present-day reality reshaping international relations. Thanks for watching Africa Daily Scoop, where Africa's story is told with truth and power. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment of the journey.